time I was in an amphitheater like this was when I was teaching undergrad students and I was grading them for attentiveness. So I'm guessing I don't need to have to do that here. Um, it's actually an interesting slot that I have I've been put in between a band that makes its own music, mental health advocacy, and labor fighting for space. Pretty much that explains how public policy works. We are, for the most part, using instruments that we have at our disposal without relying on things that are popularly available to make our point. We make policies that reach from all the way from mental health advocacy to conservation to government, more direct government policies that we think about when we talk about public policy. And pretty much like leopards searching for space, we are trying to maneuver space between the jungle, that's the government, and an increasing urbanizing society and space that's trying to find its feet. The next slide, please. It's an interesting area, public policy, because like Biju was telling, I come from background in microbiology. I have a degree in international affairs and public policy, and I'm doing something. I've done things in between that are not completely related, but also have an effect on how public policy works and how I think about public policy. So when you essentially public policy, just to introduce you to the subject, is an amalgamation of the study of political science, economics, and sociology, everything together. This is what you study. Public policy is the application. You see this in relation with other subjects too. Like, for example, biology is the study, medical practice is the application, and material sciences is the study, engineering becomes the application. But yeah, I'm just going a little ahead here. So we'll just pull back a little bit. Next slide, please. The full slide, yeah. There needs to be a context to the work, kind of work that public policy analysts do, and I'm hoping to give you that context, set you that context here. When we think about how governments work, how society works with government, how it used to work, there are two ways to describe it. One is imagined ideas, and the other is willful ignorance. This is how government used to work. Imagine ideas, for example, imagine a set, a drama set, or a Shakespearean stage where you see, whatever you see is what you get. So government essentially works in the same way. They convey whatever you need to hear is what is on stage. They don't want you to see backstage. There's a certain amount of discretion involved in policy making in government, where you are informed about the things that you need to know about, and which wouldn't hopefully cause too much controversy for the government. Discretion is not bad in that sense. There is a certain amount of dignity to discretion. You don't really need to see what goes on in the green room all the time. But the problem becomes when this discretion is taken to such an extent that the government starts misusing the discretion. And then the society starts becoming suspicious of the discretions that are secrets that are being kept, and starts imagining things. So come back to the stage. So you're seeing something on stage, something doesn't fit right in the play that you're seeing, something doesn't fit right in the drama that you're watching. And then you start to imagine. You put characters in there, you dramatize these characters, you build your own narratives. So that pretty much covers the imagined ideas part. So a lot of what we see with the government is not just what the government is telling you, that there is also a lot of imagined ideas, people's ideas, characters, and so you're thinking about your wacky plots and your suspicious characters hanging around the government corridors, and your Lutyens buzz on Twitter. These are all things that are imagined ideas for the most part. But the interesting thing is that the imagined ideas goes hand in hand with willful ignorance. What is willful ignorance? It's that moment when you hear of a corruption scandal in the government and you go, oh my God, I didn't know that the government could be so corrupt. And at some point in your mind you did know that the government could be corrupt, that corruption is a part of the government, but you chose to ignore. There is a certain dignity to the ignorance. You give yourself a certain dignity to ignore something and then become all surprised. A purity, if for a lack of a better word, that willful ignorance offers. You don't want to know what really happens in the government too. That willful ignorance is you don't want to really go behind the scenes, and so when something pops up from the green room, you can act all surprised and I never knew my government was so bad kind of attitude that happens. So this is pretty much how the government has been working in relation with the society. Next slide, please. And this status quo has been maintained by a few factors. One is the vertical accountability in the government. The government pretty much acts like a pyramid. So you have somebody sitting on the top, and instructions go seep down to the bottom of the pyramid, and accountability is always to the boss higher up. There is no lateral accountability. You don't have anybody to answer on your leg. All you have to do is answer to the person above you. And that also creates a lag and an asymmetry between departments. Sometimes the base of the pyramid doesn't always know what the top of the pyramid wants. The top of the pyramid always doesn't know what the third or the fourth layer of the department is doing. There is an inbuilt secrecy that happens in departments. People don't want to really tell everything to their boss, and that boss doesn't really want to tell everything to the boss above. And it creates an asymmetry of information that happens, that is natural for a system that works in a hierarchy. Civil society also, there was, I'm sorry, I think you went a slide back. Sorry. Civil society also lacked the tools for better connectivity. We didn't have the tools, the Twitter, the Facebook, the WhatsApp groups, the social media. The media itself was not giving us the kind of interconnectivity that we have now. So we didn't really want to, I mean, if unless the government stepped up and told you the water was polluted, or the air is really polluted and you shouldn't stay there, you didn't know. And you didn't, honestly, it wasn't, there was a willful ignorance about that idea. And the investment to change this entire system was a lot greater than what the returns were at that point. I mean, I'm talking, this is 20, 30 years back. I'm not sure how many of you were aware of that time, but yeah, 20, 30 years back, I mean, there was not a lot of interaction between the government and the society. Next slide, please. So what happens? What happened in the last 20 years? There is this huge shift in economic standing of the country. There is suddenly internet is everywhere. There people are getting connected left, right, and center, and then everybody is there. So information is going at a level that is unprecedented before. Everybody knows everything. That is information across lines. It's not just vertically. I'm talking about civil society here. It's not just vertically. You know something, you tell your friend about it. Your friend tells somebody else about it. There is a connectivity that has come in with the age of information that was not there before. There is an increased capacity to mobilize knowledge. Wikipedia, Google it. You have literally knowledge is at your fingertips. You know how to collect knowledge, where to collect knowledge from, and how to disseminate that knowledge across structures. Think of it as an web, for lack of a better word. There is also a greater increased capacity to push against traditional methods. You see something, you don't like it, you're not alone anymore. You have 350 followers on Twitter and 500 and odd friends on Facebook, and even more that you can connect through across the internet to mobilize, to push against something that is that is you think is traditional and unfair at this stage in your society. There is a collective push for greater lateral accountability, and most importantly, there is a need for more inclusive government. People are demanding that the government answer them. Be it with your Anna Hazare movement, be it with the Delhi rape case, be it with any of these mass movements that you see, everything has been based on the fact that society has become a lot more connected. There is ability to gather knowledge and disseminate knowledge across class, across whatever divides that society had, and there is the ability to bring together people to push for something that they did not know that they needed to do before, essentially. Next slide, please. But the problem is this. The government still functions in the same way. The government is still a hierarchy. There is still vertical accountability. There is still very little incentive to change, at least so far. There is still very little incentive to change. There is still information symmetry. And the most critical of things, there is a fear of loss of power when this changes, if this changes. Nobody wants to lose power. Nobody wants to go into a powerful position thinking that let me change the entire system. That's my goal in becoming Prime Minister or Chief Minister. Their first rational thought is what can I do to make sure that I am as powerful tomorrow as I am today. That is not, and that ideally speaking has not been the incentive for change so far, because society has not pushed them to, your voting power has not been used to push for that incentive. And there is also a high culture of reason giving. How many of you have seen Yes Minister here? Or Yes Prime Minister? So there is, he'll teach you about it in the next class, I guess. Yeah, there is a high culture of reason giving. You say, why was your policy not submitted on time? Like a dog ate it, or there was rain, or was caught up in a protest, mass movement protest, or whatever. It's reason giving, and it's become an acceptable part of a culture. So what happens is, there are these two networks. On one side, you have your networked society that is calling for lateral accountability, that is talking across tables, that is moving information in a way that has not been moved before. And then you have this pyramid on the other side. So, and this part of society is pushing for greater change, is calling for change, is yearning for change. It's like an amoebic movement. It's, pulsating. It's like moving across society, and everything it touches, it's changing, and it's asking, demanding, making people demand things that they have not demanded before. If you did not have a telephone connection 50 years back, if you did not have a telephone connection, there was not much you could do about it. You just pretty much waited in line for a telephone connection. But that's not the case now. I mean, you could literally tweet your way to a telephone connection today. So that kind of network society on one side and the pyramid on the other side. What happens when these two meet? There are two ways that there is this noise, so this immense noise, and there are two ways that changes happen. Next slide, please. And we call it in Takshashila circles, we call it the Maidan or the marathon. Maidan is your popular Tahrir Square, your Orange revolutions, your Tunisian revolutions, your Turkish revolutions, where a whole bunch of people just come together, purely driven by the fact that somebody on a social network called out to them and said that there is something happening and this is not fair and we need to topple the government. So everybody comes. There are like thousands and thousands of people all across the world. It was unprecedented. So many revolutions happening at the same time. They had a name for it. Arab Spring, Jasmine Revolution, Orange Revolution, whatnot. But the key thing was this. All these revolutions demanded one thing. That the top of the pyramid, the apex of the pyramid be toppled. Because in their view, that was a problem. The apex of the pyramid was the reason for all the damage that was happening in society. Doesn't matter what form of government it is, everything still functions in a pyramid. So the apex of the pyramid, let's topple the pyramid and then everything will become alright. So there are these mobs, bloody, calling for blood, and it's violent, it's incendiary. And it finally did. They didn't manage to topple a whole bunch of apexes at the pyramids. But what happens? There's a power vacuum. What you did essentially was push the top of the pyramid down. But everything else remains the same. What have you done to change the base of the pyramid? Isn't that where, isn't that power, is that there too, at the base of the pyramid? So there's a power vacuum on top. Rebuilding is painful and destructive. Imagine climbing up all these stairs to just put up the top of the pyramid again. It is painful. I'm talking in a literal sense, but you can imagine it. I'm guessing you can imagine it in a way how government can work. You are essentially calling for the top of the pyramid to be replaced without doing anything to the entire base of the pyramid. So you have to climb. It's painful. It's bloody. The other way is the marathon. How many of you here are runners? Quite a few. And you talk to each runners here, marathon runners here, and you will know this thing. So marathon, a little context for marathon running. Marathon running essentially consists of three. You can divide it roughly into three parts. The first is, of course, the most difficult. You decide you want to run a marathon. You put on your shoe, you wake up at 5 in the morning and get out of the door. And then you start running. Or by some force in your head, you start running. So you are run 2 kilometers, say, on a really good day, you've run 2, and then you stop because you can't push yourself anymore. You don't know what you're doing wrong. You feel like your heart is going to pop out of your mouth and your legs are like buckling under you, and that's this whole feeling. So what you do, you go back home, you study a bit on what marathon running is about. You talk to experts, you study books on marathon running, you start subscribing to Runner's World magazines and subscriptions of the internet. You learn a lot more, so you start running again. So you go, 5 months, 6 months, you run a few 10Ks, you run a few half marathons, and then you talk to more experts, you study, become a lot more aware of how your body works, of what it means to breathe properly, stability and all that. So how is public policy similar to marathon? For one, it takes the same amount of commitment. It's long, it's arduous, it's slow, it's steady work. You're not going to get to 42 kilometers the day you decide to tie your shoelaces up. The next part is a lot of people here, I'm sure, I've been talking to a few, a lot of people here are already involved in NGOs, not-for-profit organizations, your local committees and organizations that choose to do something, be it working in women's issues, be it working on sanitation, or be it working on other issues. You're already part of societies. So the next step, that is the first step. So the next step is you learn. You learn about public policy. You learn what you can do to push that boundary a little bit more. You talk to experts. You learn about what it means to actually be in the government or do something in the government. And you move on. And then the 42 kilometers is still a long, long way off. You're going to get years to get there. But you know you're on the right path to get there. You know at some point you're going to get that marathon done. The next slide, I'm sorry. So, learning public policy is simple. One, it makes for knowledgeable change. You're not just blindly running behind a mob, screaming for blood and trying to topple the apex. You are changing with knowledge in your hands. Number two, it's got a directed impact. You know exactly where you're going to hit, be it local government, be it the central government, be it the Panchayat Raj in your local villages. Your impact is directed. The next, it's constructive. You start at the margins and you push your way back up. It's a lot more constructive than just trying to randomly throw some rocks off this thing and scratching your head trying to figure out how to rebuild the entire thing up again. Change starts at the margin and moves up. It's slow and steady. The next slide, please. Thank you. Knowledge in public policy helps in few ways. One, you understand the system. It is extremely important. No matter what change you want to do in this country, it is extremely important that you understand the system. Sanitation is a huge problem. Everybody here knows sanitation is a huge problem. So what? What does it mean? Does it mean there are not enough toilets? Does it mean there are not enough people using the toilets? Does it mean the government is not giving enough incentives to people to use the toilets, or they're not building enough toilets? So you understand the system. What does it mean when people say sanitation is a problem? And you stop and ask them, what do you mean? You learn what it means, this thing. You learn how the system addresses the issue. So sanitation is a problem. What is the government doing about it? Are they building more toilets? Are they giving incentives to people to use toilets? Are they building? Is it because women are? It's a cascading thing. Women go out to use toilets, so they get raped. Maybe, but if you understand the system better, you would know how it works better too. Not that wouldn't be this thing. You make for an informed, empowered citizen rather than a person in a mob running demanding blood. You have constructive contributions. The first thing that you're taught in public policy is that constructive contribution is important. Criticism has to be based on the possibility of change, as opposed to as opposed to saying something for the sake of it. You criticize the government, criticize it based on the possibility of change. Don't just criticize the government because you can. What can you do about that? You blame the government for various ills. So what can you do about it? You have to know public policy to know what you can do about it, unfortunately. But that's how the system works. And the most important part of learning public policy is you can filter out the noise. You will learn to recognize what is a recent argument as opposed to just plain noise, as opposed to people screaming that the nation wants to know. You will learn out what a recent argument is, how to make recent arguments against this thing. The next slide. So public policy basically works. I mean, I introduced you to public policy in the first slide. Public policy basically means learning about what the government is doing, the implements or the tools in the government's hand to create a policy. So in a big picture, how it works is foreign policy, security policy, education policy, health policy. All these are domains of both national governments and state governments at various levels. National government is involved with foreign policy, security policy and such. And state governments take on the load at various levels. At the local level, how do urban governance systems work? How do your cities tick? What makes your cities tick? How do cities take shape? What do local governments and their policies? How does local government and their policies impact you? How urbanization policies within the government changes impacts your life. Simple things. You have a train running in the middle of the city. How does that impact people living on either side of the tracks? How does creating a brand new ritzy secure housing complex in the middle of a city impact the people around it? Like for example, one of the most popular things that we talk about is the housing complexes that crop up. They've been cropping up all over the country. You know, they are like flashy and they are like lakhs, crores of rupees, and they have these fancy security systems at each house and the gate, swimming pools and everything. And the one thing that they all share in common is that they don't have any slums around the area. Why? One, because it impacts the people who are coming to live there. People don't want to really live next to a slum if you give them the option. So, you know, they have the option, they use that option. But here's the other problem. If you don't have lower income people living around this, where are your maids, your drivers, and where are your people who are going to work at your homes going to come from? They have to travel from far inside. So how are they going to travel? Are there enough public transport systems or systems that bring them in? These are all things that, you know, as an urban government has to think about, as a local government has to think about. These are all things that factor when you're talking about public policy. One of the things that segregated neighborhoods is a very, it's a huge problem in Bombay. You know, people selectively choosing who they want to assign their neighborhoods to, who they want to allow in their flats or who they want to allow in their communities. In Chennai, we have a problem from veg and non-veg communities. I'll figure that out. But yeah, so learning public policy helps you address these problems at the basic. A lot of you here are architecture students and a lot of you are going into town planning and interior decoration and whatnot. Once you learn public policy, the things that you can do with it is to plan better towns. At the most basic, just plan better towns. If I spoke to a few who are interested in town planning. You learn how to use public policy in everyday life. Be it you become a doctor, how does medical policies affect you? You become a teacher, how do education policies affect you? How does changing the syllabus affect you? What can you do about it? At the most, I'm sorry. You start by pushing at the margin. You go talk to your local corporator. You go talk to your local government and see how does it impact. How is one particular policy going to impact your neighborhood? Somebody here was talking about sanitation drives, slums, beautifying slums. A group that went to beautify slums. You went to beautify slums. So did you follow up with what happened after that? How does the city planning commission take to that, and did they manage to retain whatever was beautified? You talk about women safety. One of the first things that people do when they talk about women's safety is um, build a little glass house around the woman so that she can walk safely around the neighborhood. They design cities with fear in their mind. It's called agoraphobia. You design cities thinking, oh my god, is a woman going to be afraid at this point, that point, or that point? So you build a city, entire city. It's not just women, it's even people. You think your first instinct on stepping out in the street is, which car am I going to get hit by, which bus do I have to avoid, which train, lorry, or whatever vehicle that is flying on the street is going to mow me down, or how can I get from point A to point B safely. Should cities be designed with that fear in mind, or should cities be designed with the idea of getting a person from point A to point B, period? The other popular thing is privatizing of public spaces. They say, okay, you can't walk around in the public space. Let's go into the mall and walk. There's a lot of space within a mall to walk. But think about it. What you are giving up when you're going to walk in the mall? You are in a private place. All your rights as a citizen, your rights to come together as a group is all going to be undermined the minute you're in a private place. The mall is going to dictate how you behave. You are not gathering as a public citizen. You are gathering as somebody who's interested in walking in the mall. So that undermines democracy. There is a whole field here. Dictatorship by cartography. It's called dictatorship by cartography because cities are being designed in such a way that governments have greater power to rule over people's life in some sense. Governments have greater power to control where people gather, how police can move quickly in, and how easy it becomes to disperse crowds within a city. So should cities be planned with that in mind, or should cities be planned with the idea of encouraging more ideas, encouraging more free speech between citizens, more interconnectivity between citizens? I'll end quickly. Two pioneers in this field one was France, which started this whole idea of designing cities to ensure faster movement of police. France, if you could imagine, is like built in concentric circles. So the innermost circle has the government in power, the next circle has the really elite government officials, and then so on and so forth until the final circle has all the Roma tribes, the gypsies coming in. So, and all these things have wide roads which will ensure faster movement of police to stop people from protesting. And very few of them have squares. This is an exercise that I want all of you to do. Go and find out how many cities in India have public places, like a square, a main street where people can gather easily. A Tahrir square, if you will. A main street where people can gather, where people can talk about, where people can just linger around. Why not? Why not? The other groundbreaking revolution, just to localize this a little bit more, was in Austria. They did an experiment to see how women use public spaces differently. And an entire city was designed to make sure that women have greater comfort in using public spaces. It's an interesting experiment. I want you to go read more about it. This is why I'm not talking about it a lot more. But essentially, the way women work, the way women have to access houses, doctors, and other, this thing is a lot different than how men use it, with women with children, with people to take care of and stuff. So they design an entire city to make sure that women have greater mobility within a city. But just to cap everything off, see, the whole point of this was to make sure that you have have some ground knowledge about public policy. What public policy is, what public policy can do, and how to do it. Next slide. So, what public policy is just this. You learn about how your system works, you learn about how your surroundings work, and you learn about how to impact change. And you study public policy in one of these few universities. IIM has fantastic courses. Patricia Institution has a fantastic course. Ours is a 12-week blended online course that can be done part-time by professionals. We've had everybody from engineers to civil servants to aspiring NGO activists taking the course, and people who just wanted to know what every movement meant or what every popular revolution means. Next time. So and it kind of brings together everything that you've studied. Like I have a background in science. I know people who have had backgrounds in engineering, biotech, literature. Everybody taking public policy and trying to use that in their own way to make sense and to have an impact on their world. It's about pushing that little bit, moving away from your local NGOs or your little college communities to making an impact at a higher range. You can do that now because of the way society, of the privileges the society has given you. And I think more of you, I hope more of you consider doing public policy. Any questions? I'm sorry. I would really love to have some questions. It would be quite dull if there were no questions. You're audible to me. I'm not sure if you're audible to everybody.
Is this audible to everybody? No. Can I have sound on this, please? Hello. Yeah. Thank you, Priya, for this fascinating talk. One thing that was very interesting as an observation was how you've analyzed public engagement as the Maidan and the marathon. I think that was a great way of clearing the cobwebs that we had in our mind with respect to public policy. One question that I have is, there are a lot of, the crowd is dominated by students of architecture and design planning. If you come, I'd love to invite you on the thesis jury day, of the undergraduate course, and you'll find that a lot of students take up causes which are very social in nature, and deep down, I sense this amongst students that there's a very deep desire amongst them to change or to bring some kind of a change in society. After the thesis, of course, they didn't just get sucked into the whole, profession, and then we don't know what happens to them after that. But I just want to know if you can just throw some light on how we can bridge this gap between desire and actual change. And you did speak about it being a marathon, it being a kind of a long drawn affair. Just to give you an example, as a small group of architects, we were also not very far away from here is a node called Kharghar, and I also live there, and there is a very, very long skywalk, okay, which could have actually been very, very small, okay. It was meant to connect the railway station, which is on one side of the highway, and the residential neighborhood, which is on the other side of the Mumbai-Pune expressway. So all it required was just a bridge between those 2 points, but it went on to become this really long, monstrous skywalk, and predictably it's falling under its own weight. CIPCO is not able to maintain, run the maintenance for the skywalk. So we thought, let's start investigating this particular case and see if we can, do something about it. And we've not got too far, but I can imagine the kind of the long road that it is, to get from identifying an area of work and then coming up with analysis and then solutions, and then if you can just either through experience or through some case studies, just enumerate how can we bridge this gap between desire and the finding it.
The simplest way, like I told you, is tie up your shoelace and wake up in the morning. It's to go dive straight in. See, the thing is, one of the main reasons that people are a lot hesitant to dive into something as exotic as public policy, if I might say, is because there are very few experts in the field, but there is very little knowledge about it out there. Engineering is a lot more popular, biotechnology, and these all sound very sexy. And you see a lot more your movies, your popular media, and your and all our speeches are tailored around these fields. Public policy analysts very rarely have an audience or are able to talk about it in a forum like this, for example. Like I said, most of our talks are usually in public policy conferences where we talk to, again, public policy students. So there are very little chance for us to get our get other people to know about what public policy means. And it's also a little exciting in the sense that it um, like I said, people don't know how to apply it. Okay, so I've studied public policy, so how do I apply it? And it is not the same, it doesn't give the same reward as say engineering or medicine. I mean medicine, yeah, you have to retire by then start earning, but then that's a different point. But it doesn't offer the same quick feedback like engineering or medicine. But that's what I'm trying to say. So, for example, the Skywalk case. It was actually one of our faculty, Mr. Raj Cherubal of City Connect, based out of Chennai. He actually spoke about similar problem like that he faced. One of the reasons why skywalks don't work is because it's too high up for pedestrians. People would rather run across the road, jump across the divide and run across the other way than walk all the way up, go and come back down. And imagine the trouble that people with disabilities have to face with skywalks. The most simplest solution that he suggested was design road for pedestrians, not for cars. You design a road where the zebra crossing is slightly elevated than the rest of the road, like a speed bump, for example. So people can walk easily across the zebra crossing, and cars will naturally slow down because there is a speed bump there. So you have a pedestrian crossing that is on a slightly elevated level. But getting that done was a tremendous problem because not a single government agency knows what is the how high should a speed bump be? How wide should zebra crossing stripes be? What color should they be painted in so it can be easily visible in the night? These are one of the examples that he told was how do you put a traffic signal in a junction? There is certain rules and regulations as to how wide the road has to be and where the traffic signal has to be situated. But people who build roads don't think about that. Which is why one reason why we talk about pushing the government through marathon is we make the government a lot more networked too. So people who build roads talk to other people who have to have other things on the roads, like your electricity lines, your sewerage lines, your gas lines, everything. That a network automatically gets built, and people invest a lot more in planning roads. So you don't need to walk across the public policy analysts don't have to walk across the road early in the morning to find out how long the road is, which was what he had to do essentially. But it just get in. That is the only way that you can figure out how to tackle these things. It's easier at some level to get involved in a society, in a smaller society, or say in a college society which goes around helping, talking about women's welfare, talking about sanitation problems, or building toilets for poor people and everything. But think about the long term. It is not just about moving the garbage bin from your house to the house next door. It's about making sure that the garbage is put inside the bin and making sure that the bin is at a safe distance away from the road so people don't crash into it while turning around. And that is the process. It is a long process. I won't make any of this thing. I've been at this thing for people like Nitin have been at this for almost 10 years. And what he talked about 7-8 years back is just getting implemented now at some level. So it's and the remunerations are extremely tiny. I mean, you can't expect to go in and have your eureka moment in like a couple of months. I have my eureka moment when somebody calls me at a place like this for a conference. I'm like, yeah, there's somebody else who wants to know about public policy kind of thing. But it's small. Like if I'm talking to a huge crowd here, the amount of people who are already involved in just clubs and societies and different parts, I'm sure there are a lot. And think about it in a different way. Go home and see how involved you can get in your housing flat societies. Because there are laws and bylaws and multiple laws that dictate how high flats are built, how much width that has to be for and fire exits and all that. So see how difficult it is to just tackle that little thing. There is one experiment that we do in Takshashila for our graduate policy course. I know I'm talking about, but this is the best example that I give. One thing that we do as a final exam is give them a policy problem that they have to work on as a group. You have to understand that every policy making has multiple stakeholders, has a time limit, and has different people giving experts on the subject. So a simple problem, like one of the problems that we worked on was the sanitation issue. There was a laptop example. The sanitation issue was basically the government wants to the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. They want to build more toilets. You have to find out how to build more toilets and how to make people use them. And we put 10 people in a room for 3 days and asked them to figure out the problem. And the number of solutions that groups of 5 come up with are huge. Now multiply that 100-fold, because that many people, those are the number of people that you have in the government with immense knowledge on the subject and with immense knowledge about local politics. So that is the kind of monstrosity, gargantuan nature of policy making that we have to face. And the margin, again, it's marginal. You start working at the margins. You start going to your housing society meetings regularly and start figuring out what the laws are and how to see how laws can be changed in that way. You don't want a garbage bin in front of this thing, go to your corporator. Don't bribe somebody to move that bin. Go to your corporator and explain to them the reason why the garbage bin cannot be in that particular spot. Chances are you'll never get anything done for the first few months, but then at some point that person in the corporate office is going to be so bugged about you turning up at the doorstep every day that they're going to do something about it. And that will be a logical step, because that will be a long-term step. And that will be a little victory, initially.
Any
other questions?
Priya?
I think at this point I will have to probably grade you on how much you know about, how much you learned about.
Well, I think people just, on that. Is there a question here? Yeah. Get the mic to Sada. You want to take this one?
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't see you, but I can hear you.
Yeah, but I can see.
Yeah, okay, good. This is how public policy works, exactly.
So, we always talk about this, that we are connected globally. So,
Yeah.
So, and very fast. And we are now talking about policies and that's the public, which are very huge. So, huge in the terms of application. Like, we talk about masses and globe, but when it comes on application part, it is always grassroots level. So, something about that. Like, there is this huge global connectivity, which is like a huge scale, and there is this application which should start from a very grassroots level. So,
Exactly. See, you bring up a good point actually. So the application has to start at a grassroots level, because, like I said again, it's very easy to change the person on top. It's very easy to change the prime minister or the president or the dictator on top. All you need is the entire bunch of people screaming and shouting, essentially, in a very simplistic terms. The where the two come together is, you work at a grassroots level, but you learn from what is being done around the globe. See, we are not the only people who are talking about We are not the only people talking about public policy. There are movements all around the world, there are people all around the world trying to figure out how to change governments, how to make governments respond to them. And ours is not the only government that works in a hierarchy. Hierarchical governments are pretty much the norm across the globe. And everybody realized that changing it is going to be a long, arduous task. So there are people around the globe working at grassroots level. Simple, the most simple thing, local elections. How many of you go to vote for local elections? How many of you know who the people are standing in your local elections? How many of you go to campaign for the people at your local elections? That is a huge thing now, globally. So learn from that and start trying to implement some of that at the local level. You go to your local party office and try to figure out who the candidate is and how do you vote for the candidate. What does the candidate stand for? And it's not, you demand the candidate to set out, give you a bunch of things that they are planning to do during their tenure. Chances are that most of it will not get done because the candidate is also going to be looking at coming back to power the next term. But the thing is, you know, and you can push for the things that you think are required immediately. And it starts at the local, but this is, you learn from the global. You start at the local, but you learn from the global. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah.
Hello, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yeah. During my masters, one of my study was related to Usmanabad district of Maharashtra, where we found out that there were several issues related to roads and houses which were aligned to that roads. But we came up with that issue. We projected it to the municipality and all the local operators to whom we could, and they came up with this thing that the houses which are illegal, they are already illegal, but there were people living since past for more than 100 years, and for these many 100 years they did not projected that issue that we have to eradicate that. So when we tried to give them better standard of living by saying that that road has to be improved for their living, so they started pressurizing the local people, where we had the support of them initially, and when they were pressurized by local operators, they lost everything. So the whole issue was like eradicated again, and ultimately we could not do anything for them. So that it is like again the common people who are suffering, and these people, the local government people, they already have these tricks to be applied for certain issues.
Yeah.
When somebody is trying to really help for the common people of that city or town.
Yeah. No, I mean, what you say is again 100% true. See, it's the government is this huge, lumbering elephant, for lack of a better picture, and it's not going to move at all. I mean, the first time you poke it, you prod it, it's like going to shift a little bit and sit at another place, but it's still going to remain the same at large level. And the issues that you tackled, that issues with multiple stakeholders with different priorities. The people in the houses didn't want to be moved because at some level they were comfortable. They didn't want you to come and tell them that they are uncomfortable, because they're not. They're comfortable. They don't have a problem of being there. But the issue, the people in the local government were comfortable that these people were comfortable. They didn't want you to go and keep prodding at them and pushing them to start rising against them, because then their position comes into the issue. Then the next local election, there will be questions about why the road was not done properly, and so it's not an easy task to come up to come up to issues like that. And the best way to tackle it is to see what else can be done in a situation like this. Find out there is also the problem of land legality, illegal squatting, and all that problem comes in. So what are the other issues, multiple issues that are in play, and see what else can be done in a situation like this. Do you really need to tackle that road problem, or is there something else at a smaller scale that you can tackle before moving on to the bigger issue? Or move on to something else and then come back. See, it's a lot similar to like housing societies which want to be demolished. There will always be that one person sitting in the middle of the flat saying that I'm really happy with the way things are and I don't want to move. I don't want this entire building to be demolished and rebuilt again. You're not going to convince him on the first try. There is always going to be some sort of incentive that will drive that person to change his mind. Incentives. Incentives matter to people. Incentives matter to people, incentives matter to the people in power, incentives matter to the people who are going to be in power.
I think we'll have to wrap that, yeah, because we're running a little late. Thank you so much, Priya. Please give her a round.